Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named The X-Files Season 4 Part 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The story shifts to Scully facing her toughest challenge yet. Mulder visits her at the hospital and even brings flowers. She's just learned the MRI confirmed a brain tumor inoperably lodged where surgery would kill her. Without treatment, her prognosis is grim. Mulder is devastated. Together they ask their boss for a long leave of absence so Mulder can stay by her side. Scully once survived an abduction by a rogue research group that had splintered off from the secret organization. They'd been secretly kidnapping women for experiments, never sharing data with their parent organization until the secret organization sent cleanup teams to shut them down. Scully wasn't the only victim. A dozen other women were abducted, subjected to identical tests, then quietly released. Every single one later developed brain cancer. Determined to uncover how Scully herself contracted cancer, Mulder and Scully retraced the victim's last known gathering place. There, they discovered someone remotely downloading personal files on all the test subjects. Tracing the IP address led them to a suburban home where a young man answered the door. He claimed to know all the former abductees and informed them that, except for one woman named Penny, still hospitalized, the others had succumbed to brain tumors last year. Scully visited Penny in the hospital. As fellow subjects, Penny greeted her warmly, but Scully had no memories of her. Penny urged Scully to trust the very physician overseeing her treatment. Desperate to survive, Scully agreed and had Mulder bring her overnight essentials for admission. Meanwhile, Mulder and the Insider were combing through files when Mulder got Scully's call. He abandoned the Insider and dashed to the hospital, only to discover the informant's body melted into a heap of green foam. He realized with horror the young man had been an alien clone. Back in her hospital room, Scully found the physician's techniques deeply unsettling, unconventional therapies that triggered nightmares of her abduction. Mulder uncovered that all the returned victims had become infertile. That night, he snuck into the local fertility clinic to access records and spotted a shadowy figure. When Mulder gave chase, the figure wheeled around. It was the same face as the clone he'd just lost. This second doppelganger revealed they shared Mulder's goal: to expose the truth behind the women's abductions. He helped Mulder hack the clinic's system, unearthing a roster of patients who'd undergone sterilization surgery. Scully and the other abductees were all on the list. Next, Mulder enlisted his mad scientist friends. Using a decoder they'd acquired from a Chinese contact, they infiltrated the Roomba Institute's database and downloaded Scully's complete genetic profile. It showed that the abduction experiments had mutated her DNA, triggering the brain cancer. Determined to stop it, Mulder broke into the Roomba Institute. There he discovered the physician was on staff, meaning the very doctor treating Scully was in league with her kidnappers. Mulder called in his friends to race back to the hospital and halt Scully's treatment. Inside Roomba's hidden labs, Mulder found row upon row of tanks, each containing a still-developing human clone. These clones had covertly guided Mulder here, feeding him breadcrumbs of evidence. He was led to a cold storage room filled with human ova, eggs harvested from the abducted women, including Scully's. The Institute had used high-dose radiation to induce superovulation, then harvested the eggs to create these clones. They realized that same radiation was why every test subject returned home with cancer. But the clones themselves, having inherited their mothers on a cellular level, did not wish to continue the Institute's work. They begged Mulder to help find a cure, for Scully and for Penny. After all, in a very real sense, the women had given these clones life. Mulder's forced break-in drew the attention of the Institute's hit squads, and he barely escaped with his life, thanks to help from his scientist friends. He raced straight to the hospital where Scully was sitting vigil beside Penny's bedside. Penny, the last surviving test subject, finally succumbed to her illness. Now Scully was the only one left. The physician who had been treating Scully was revealed to be in league with the kidnappers. He vanished once the whole operation was exposed. Disillusioned, Scully refused further treatment and checked herself out against medical advice. She told Mulder she wanted to keep fighting the good fight together, no matter how little time she had left. Mulder fully supported her decision. But Mulder kept one secret. He'd retrieved Scully's harvested ova from the Institute's files and hidden them away. He wasn't ready to share even that discovery with her. In the final scene, Skinner met with the smoking man. He admitted that the rogue research cell was tied to the secret organization and begged the smoking man to find a way to save Scully's life. The smoking man offered a cryptic condition in return, leaving Skinner deep in thought. The scene shifts to a remote Eastern European hamlet, where mourners gather for the funeral of Ariel's fiancé Isaac, who was brutally murdered days earlier by 3 anti-Semitic youths. Grieving deeply, Ariel scoops up a handful of earth from Isaac's grave and walks away. That night, under flickering lightning, someone molds a clay figure at the gravesite. Miraculously, the figure comes to life. The next morning, Mulder and Scully receive Isaac's case file. One of the three killers has been strangled to death overnight, and his body bears Isaac's fingerprints. But Isaac has been 6 feet under since the funeral. Could his spirit, or something born of that grave clay, be exacting revenge? They visit Ariel's home. Her father is outraged by their request to exhume Isaac's body for an autopsy since he was buried only a few days ago. Yet Ariel seems oddly calm. Mulder notices a vicious anti-Semitic flyer in the yard. He believes someone distributed it to stir up hatred that led to Isaac's murder. Their investigation leads them to the man handing out the flyers. He freely admits his loathing of Jews, but denies ever telling the youths to kill Isaac. With the other 2 suspects gone underground, he refuses to say where they are. Mulder and Scully leave, only to follow a clue to the cemetery that very night. Under cover of darkness, the remaining 2 killers return to Isaac's grave, convinced he's staged his death. One youth is attacked by an unseen force while fetching tools. Unaware of his friend's fate, the other opens the coffin, only to find Isaac's body intact. Terrified, he flees, and when Mulder and Scully arrive, they find the second youth dead, strangled like the first. At the crypt, the agents spot a dusty old book tucked beside Isaac's casket. Mulder reaches for it, and it bursts into flame in his hands. The surviving youth finally track down the flyer handler, the Jews hater who had hired them to kill Isaac. In their confrontation, the youth confessed that the Jews hater, consumed by hatred for Jews, had thought to teach Isaac a lesson. He never intended murder, but the boys went too far, and Isaac was beaten to death. Now that 2 of the trio lay strangled, the surviving youth, terrified for his own life, was begging the Jews hater for money to flee town. Mulder, clutching the charred fragments of the mysterious book recovered from Isaac's grave, consulted a Hebrew scholar. The book, titled The Book of Genesis, contained arcane rituals and prominently displayed Ariel's father's name on its cover. Mulder and Scully began to suspect that Ariel's father himself had summoned a clay golem to avenge his would-be son-in-law. Ariel would never believe her father capable of murder. She insisted he loved her deeply, even showing them a wedding ring he had custom-made for her, which is proof of his devotion, despite life's hardships. But devotion alone couldn't erase the mounting suspicion. They learned Ariel's father would be attending Sunday Mass, so they went to his church. As soon as he spotted them, he bolted up to the bell tower loft. Mulder and Scully followed, and found the 3rd youth dangling, strangled from the rafters. A shadow flickered behind them, and as they gave chase, they were suddenly attacked. Scully drew her gun and found herself staring at Ariel's own father. He was immediately arrested, yet he made no plea, refused any lawyer. Mulder noticed fresh mud caked on the man's sleeve, a clue that perhaps the figure in the loft was not him. After all, at his old age, he couldn't have snapped Mulder so easily. Remembering the mud, Mulder rushed back to the Jewish archives and rejoined the scholar. The scholar explained that Hebrew mystics traditionally animate golems with written words, inscribing a single letter on the creature's hand. But a golem is mindless and must be destroyed by erasing that single letter. Meanwhile, the Jews hater himself had been found strangled to death in his store, again bearing Isaac's fingerprints all over him. But Isaac's body still rested in the coffin. Scully was stunned. Mulder gripped her arm and whispered, "That was no human. It's a golem." They raced to Ariel's home, only to find her and her wedding ring gone. Today was her wedding day, after all, and her father, released for lack of evidence, was back at the church, certain his headstrong daughter wouldn't abandon the service. Despite his pleas, she refused to leave. Her love for Isaac, still alive in her heart, meant she would marry him even if he was now nothing but clay. But the clay form of Isaac turned on Ariel's father, dragging him up and hanging him from the church rafters. Mulder and Scully arrived just in time, stopping a tragic end. At last, Ariel realized the truth. Isaac was already dead like a piece of shit, and the figure before her was nothing but a hollow, vengeful shell. With tears, she knelt, slid her new fiancé's wedding band onto the golem's clay finger, and then gently erased the single letter on its hand. The golem crumbled to dust before her eyes. She whispered a final farewell without a smelly kiss. In this story, Ariel's grief and hatred propelled her to animate a creature of pure vengeance. But once all its quarry was dead, the golem's only remaining emotion, hatred, turned inward, threatened her father, and nearly claimed her life. Though Ariel's devotion was genuine, her father's complicity in the dark ritual made him too share in the guilt. Let's rewind to the very start, when that shadowy figure molded the clay golem of Isaac and slipped away. Watch his stride closely. That's no woman, but the silhouette of a man. It was Ariel's father all along. He couldn't bear his daughter's grief, so he helped her perform the rite from the book of Genesis to sculpt Isaac's golem. When Mulder uncovered that same book in the coffin, the father set it ablaze by sorcery, so Mulder would never learn the golem spell. And once the clay creature had its revenge, it was he who smuggled it off to safety, shouldering all blame himself to protect Ariel. But Mulder spotted the mud on his sleeve and pieced it together. In this tale of love and suspense, there's also a father's fierce devotion at its heart. The scene shifts to a general delivering a rousing speech, the crowd cheering. Skinner sits nearby, grim, whispering into his radio to coordinate with Mulder and Scully down in the crowd. They've received a tip. One of the soldiers is planning to assassinate the general. Their job is to keep him safe. Scully spots the soldier in the throng, but loses him in an instant. Moments later, the soldier strides into Mulder's protected zone, pistol drawn, heading straight for the general. Mulder pulls his gun to intervene, but in the blink of an eye, the soldier vanishes before his peeping eyes. Time rewinds to 12 hours earlier. A military official climbs into his armored SUV. Not long after they pull away, he finds a Queen of Hearts card wedged in his door. On its back, someone has hand-painted a death tarot card. Suddenly, a lone soldier appears in the passenger seat and opens fire. The driver slams the brakes, jumps out, and finds the official dead in the back, and no one else in the vehicle. A high-profile murder lands on the FBI's desk. Back at headquarters, Skinner convenes an emergency meeting. Intelligence points to a violent squad. Mulder and Scully bring the squad leader in for questioning, and under brief negotiation, he agrees to accompany them back to FBI HQ. At the squad leader's home, they find photographs of him with a long-haired man. The squad leader explains that the man is Nathaniel, once an American soldier in Vietnam, captured, then ignored by the U.S. government, which in 1973 claimed there were no POWs. To cover up the scandal, they sent teams to hunt Nathaniel down. The squad leader rescued him once, but Nathaniel disappeared until now. He believes the painted death card proves Nathaniel's the assassin, seeking vengeance on the generals who left him behind. Cut to a small memorial where a woman mourns her husband, another Vietnam veteran. Nathaniel appears behind her carrying her husband's dog tags. He tells her husband didn't die on the battlefield. He was taken prisoner. Before she can react, Nathaniel is gone. She calls the police, desperate to know the truth, but nobody takes a widow's call seriously. The woman breaks down in tears before Mulder and Scully, then blood pours from her eyes. At the hospital, doctors discover a floating blind spot in her vision. Mulder deduces that Nathaniel can create a blind spot in someone's field of vision, rendering himself invisible. Mulder next obtains Nathaniel's death certificate, signed by a general. He warns that general, slapping 2 FBI agents on his detail and escorting him into the Pentagon. Surveillance footage shows Nathaniel breezing through the security gates, completely unseen by guards. Once inside the general's private office, Nathaniel strikes, killing him and leaving that painted death card behind. But instead of fleeing, Nathaniel calmly stands beside Mulder, visible in Mulder's peripheral vision, but gone whenever Mulder turns to look directly. Only by scanning the security monitors did Mulder realize Nathaniel's invisibility isn't foolproof. He can be seen out of the corner of the eye, but not when looked at directly. Mulder tracked down the UN assistant who works at the United Nations and learned that information about Nathaniel and the other POWs had been erased by a coalition of 3 generals. Nathaniel had already killed 2 of them, but the identity of the 3rd general was still a mystery. The UN assistant revealed that the government had always been aware of Nathaniel's existence. In fact, they considered the actions of the 3 generals a disgrace and didn't really want to stop Nathaniel's revenge. Knowing it would be difficult to prevent, they assigned Mulder and Scully to protect the generals. It seems that they were hoping Mulder and Scully would fail spectacularly, giving the government an excuse to fire them both and shut down their relentless investigations into the secret organization behind it all. From the UN assistant, Mulder learned the name of the 3rd general, who was about to give a speech. On the general's desk lay a Club Ace card, its back hand-painted with a death tarot card. Mulder knew Nathaniel was lurking in the crowd, so he subtly signaled Skinner and kept speaking confidently on stage. What happened next was what we already saw. Scully lost track of Nathaniel, and then Nathaniel vanished right before Mulder's eyes. Because the general was surrounded by so many bodyguards, Nathaniel realized that after making his move, escape would be nearly impossible, so he left the scene. Mulder and Scully escorted the general away. Just moments before the general got into his car, Mulder suddenly froze. Nathaniel was hiding inside the vehicle. Mulder opened fire into the car. Nathaniel tried to drive away, but the heavy gunfire from the FBI agents was overwhelming. He was hit and fell out of the car. As he lay dying, Nathaniel repeated his introduction over and over, accompanied by mournful music. He kept going until he no longer had the strength to speak. In the end, the government covered up Nathaniel's POW status, labeling him a violent criminal and seizing his body. No one knows what he endured during the 20-plus years after his capture, nor how he came to possess his invisibility powers. The story takes a hard shot at the U.S. government. Seems like the writers finally switched gears from demonizing Russia to spotlighting homegrown corruption for a change. The scene shifts to Flight 549, a commercial passenger plane flying over northern New York, carrying over 100 people. A man named Max clutches tightly to his army green canvas bag, glancing anxiously around. Behind him, a man in a suit gets up and heads to the restroom. There, he assembles a handgun from hidden parts on his person. Suddenly, the plane begins to shake violently. Outside the window, it's as bright as daylight. A blinding beam of light floods the cabin. Cut to the present day. It's Scully's birthday, and her co-workers are throwing her a party. Mulder has a gift for her, a keychain made from an Apollo mission commemorative badge. Scully is genuinely touched, jokingly saying, "Thanks to him." Just then, a woman named Sharon approaches them. She claims to be Max's sister, that man we saw on the plane earlier. Max had been carrying something very important and was on his way to find Mulder, but 2 hours ago, his flight went down in a crash. After the crash, the government formed a special investigation team to get to the bottom of the disaster. Flight 549 had made one last call before crashing. The pilot frantically reported they were being intercepted and requested ground support. Then the line went dead. Mulder suspects aliens are involved, which earns him a round of laughter from everyone else. Meanwhile, we notice a bearded man on the investigation team. He turns out to be a key figure in the plot. The group rushes to the crash site, which is horrific. The plane is shattered into onion pieces, and all 134 passengers and crew have perished. The bearded investigator finds the suited man's body at the scene. Secretly, he takes the handgun the man had assembled and destroys the man's facial features and fingerprints. Mulder and Scully find several stopped wristwatches belonging to the victims. All of them froze at 8:01. But the crash happened at 7:52. That means 9 minutes are unaccounted for. Back in an earlier episode, Mulder and Scully experienced a 9-minute disappearance during an encounter with a UFO, which only strengthens Mulder's belief that this crash is alien-related. Suddenly, they discover a survivor at the site and rush him to the hospital. Oddly, the man has burns consistent with intense radiation exposure. Mulder locates Max's body among the victims, noting he still carries Mulder's business card. But Max's green canvas bag is missing. Then Mulder realizes something. Many of the victims' watches are missing. It's clear someone deliberately took the watches, probably to hide the fact that all passengers lost 9 minutes. So now there are two main questions. Why was there strong radiation on the plane? And what really happened during those missing 9 minutes? At this moment, Sharon returns with a bundle of letters that Max had written to her. Scully reads through them, learning that Max claimed to have been abducted by aliens multiple times and vaguely mentioned stealing something important. After handing over the letters, Sharon goes home but is immediately hit by strange beams of light and unexplained forces. She soon disappears with her sexy body, leaving her home in disarray. Mulder confidently declares that Sharon has also been abducted by aliens. They made their way to an Air Force equipment warehouse and found the ground controller, who said he tracked Flight 549 on radar before it crashed, but refused to share any other details. Surprisingly, that very night he was targeted by unknown assailants trying to kill him. After escaping, the ground controller sought out Mulder and Scully, hoping for protection. From him, they pieced together part of what happened before the crash. The ground controller explained he had been ordered to monitor Flight 549 on radar and report its location to his superiors. Soon after, the military dispatched another aircraft to intercept the flight. About 10 minutes later, the crash occurred, meaning the flight was shot down by the military. If that was true, the military was responsible for the deaths of all 134 people on board. But Mulder doubted the military would shoot down a civilian airliner without cause. He suspected there was a third plane involved, one that was invisible on radar. The military's real target was this invisible aircraft. Flight 549 had merely been caught in the crossfire, so there must be a second crash site where the invisible plane went down. That night, the investigation team leader returned to the crash site and discovered a massive UFO searching the area. The UFO then dropped off Sharon, the heavy woman who'd been abducted earlier, before vanishing quickly from his view. Using a map, Mulder deduced the second crash site was likely in the shallow waters of a nearby lake. He instructed Scully and the team leader to protect the ground controller, then hired a boat and suited up for a dive. Mulder admitted he'd never dived before but was willing to risk it to find the truth. Underwater, he found the wreckage of the invisible craft the military had shot down. But the debris didn't look like any plane he'd seen. It was something entirely alien. Inside the cockpit, Mulder discovered a dead extraterrestrial. Panic set in, and as he turned to head back, a beam of light slowly approached him. The episode ends here. Mulder and Scully carefully unraveled the layers of the crash and found military involvement. On the surface, it appeared the military shot down Flight 549, but in reality, their target was the UFO that had appeared in the same airspace. The UFO was invisible to radar, but the military knew it intended to intercept the flight. They sent planes to shoot down the UFO, but accidentally hit Flight 549 instead. Why did the UFO want to intercept Flight 549? Because on board was an important civilian, Max, who claimed multiple alien abductions. Hidden in Max's green canvas bag was evidence proving alien existence. The suited man on the plane was a military assassin sent to kill Max and steal the evidence, but he died in the crash. The bearded investigator on the team was also military, posing as rescue personnel but actually at the crash site to destroy the assassin's body and seize his gun, a cover-up to hide the military's connection to the crash. With Max dead and the evidence lost, plus military roadblocks slowing their investigation, Mulder and Scully faced an uphill battle. Back to the story, Mulder surfaces after finding the sunken UFO, only to notice a beam of light approaching from behind. It turns out to be a military salvage crew. Mulder taps the surface to signal, but as soon as he reaches shore, military personnel lying in wait immediately detain him, saying he should mind his own business. Meanwhile, Scully is tasked with protecting the ground controller. They head to a bar for a drink, but the bearded military agent tracking the ground controller shows up. The agent tries to kill the man to silence him, but Scully's unlucky colleague steps in and takes the bullet instead. Scully shoots and wounds the agent, who escapes, while her colleague tragically doesn't make it. Soon after, Scully learns from Skinner that Mulder has been arrested by the military. The stress worsens Scully's brain cancer, causing a nosebleed, but she pushes through and rushes to the military detention center to bail Mulder out. Once free, Mulder learns the military admits some responsibility for the crash. Their official story blames faulty ground radar coordinates, causing Flight 549 to collide with a military plane. As for the UFO, which never showed on radar, well, they just make it up as they go. Determined to find out what evidence Max was carrying, Mulder and Scully visit Max's former home. They discover a videotape revealing he possessed alien technology. Max intended to reveal this to the world to prove aliens exist, but now, where is this technology? Mulder pieces together the timeline of the crash. Max was clutching the alien tech on board when the military assassin in a suit tried to kill him and steal it. Suddenly, the plane shook violently as the UFO intercepted Flight 549 to retrieve the device. The UFO's plan was to erase everyone's memories after reclaiming the tech and then restore the plane's momentum. But the military discovered the UFO's location and scrambled jets to shoot it down. Losing control, Flight 549 crashed as well. The entire hijacking lasted 9 minutes, exactly the time missing from the passengers' watches. The strong radiation found at the crash site was left behind by the UFO. Later, the investigation team leader found Max's canvas bag in the wreckage, but it contained only some clothes. The trails seemed to have gone cold again. Unwilling to give up, Mulder visits Max's RV and discovers a baggage claim ticket from an airport in one of Max's letters. Meanwhile, Scully visits a psychiatric hospital to see Sharon, who was abducted by aliens and then returned. Sharon's face shows radiation burns from the ordeal. She admits she's not actually Max's sister, but a longtime friend, an aerospace engineer. She reveals that she helped Max steal alien energy technology and split it into 3 parts. Sharon and Max each kept one part, but both were stolen. Now, only one piece remains, which Max had stored at an airport locker. Mulder heads to the airport and retrieves the stored piece. However, military agents are already there, forcing Mulder to escape through a security corridor. He receives a call from Scully warning him that the package contains alien technology emitting high radiation and must not be opened. Mulder places the package through the airport's X-ray scanner and catches a glimpse of the part's shape on the big screen. Then, he boards a plane, planning to rush back to Washington overnight with the package. But the military's bearded agent has been waiting for him. The agent warns Mulder that he has rigged a parachute with explosives in the overhead compartment. If Mulder doesn't hand over the piece, the entire flight will be sacrificed. He also reveals that the government is involved in the whole incident. As Mulder is an FBI agent, he pulls a gun and locks the agent in the restroom, then calls Scully, saying he has captured the killer who murdered their unlucky colleague. Suddenly, Mulder notices his watch has stopped. Realizing something is wrong, he tries to alert the pilot to initiate emergency protocols. Unexpectedly, the bearded agent escapes the restroom, pulls out his homemade gun, and threatens Mulder to hand over the piece. In the next moment, the plane violently shakes. Mulder knows the alien UFO is outside. The UFO uses a beam of light to open the cabin door. Mulder pleads with the agent to surrender the piece, promising safety, but the agent stubbornly refuses. Cut to Mulder's plane landing at Washington Airport. When Scully and Skinner arrive, Mulder is found seated calmly, but the bearded agent is nowhere to be seen. Passengers gather their belongings and leave as if nothing happened. Mulder casually asks the boss the time. He replies 10:56, but Mulder's watch shows 10:47, meaning Mulder lost 9 minutes. Memories wiped clean. Only when packing up does Mulder spot a small parachute on the overhead rack and realize the bearded agent probably switched flights mid-journey. Skinner looks utterly confused. At the end, Scully pulls out the Apollo commemorative badge given to her on her birthday. She says she finally understands its meaning. Extraordinary people and moments push history forward. Mulder admires the great figures who shaped history and longs to become one of them. From this story, we learn the entire event was triggered by the alien energy Max stole, a resource both the military and aliens desperately want. To reclaim it, aliens sent UFOs twice to hijack the plane, while the military didn't hesitate to shoot down the UFO, even at the cost of passengers' lives. The scene shifts to two men arguing heatedly. Suddenly, an elderly man rushes out and tells one of them he will die at 11:46. Then, school security arrives and takes the old man away. Before leaving, he urges the other man wearing glasses to save his friend. He even clearly calls out the man's name, Jason. 6 minutes later, that friend is going to be hit by a bus. Jason stands at a street corner and spots a bus approaching in the distance. He glances back at his friend who is bent over by the roadside, picking up papers that fell into a puddle. Jason calls out and runs toward him, but it's too late. The friend is struck and killed by the bus. Because Jason was so close and in the driver's blind spot, the bus driver claims Jason pushed his friend into the path of the bus. Jason looks down at his watch. It's exactly 11:46. So the old man wasn't lying. Cut to Mulder and Scully taking on the case. The victim is a promising researcher, someone with a bright future cut short by the accident. The driver insists Jason pushed the victim. Jason tells Mulder and Scully about the mysterious old man who warned him his friend would die and how he only tried to save him. He also says the old man was taken away by school security. But when Mulder and Scully find the security guard, he's dead, literally frozen solid into an ice sculpture. At the police station, Mulder sees a woman named Lisa visiting Jason. After Lisa leaves, Mulder interrogates Jason. Jason admits he once falsified data to get research funding, and his friend found out and threatened to report him. That's what sparked their argument that day. Jason's research project was in cryobiology, the study of low temperatures and their effects on living things. Just then, Scully calls with new info. The security guard's body has Jason's fingerprints all over it. They have both the motive and the means. Jason's in deep trouble. The scene shifts to a hotel where a doctor named Yonechi arrives. The mysterious old man from before approaches him and strikes up a conversation, claiming to be a fan of Yonechi's work and saying he's arranged the best room for him. Once inside, the old man thanks Yonechi for helping his research. Yonechi is confused since he doesn't know this man. Suddenly, the old man injects something into Yonechi's hand, which immediately starts freezing. When Mulder and Scully get there, Yonechi has turned into an ice statue. According to hotel staff, the suspect is a man around 70 years old. Scully suspects Yonechi was injected with some kind of biological agent. Since Jason's project involved cryobiology, Mulder and Scully head to his lab. Jason's partner, Lisa, meets them and after reviewing Yonechi's MRI scans is shocked. She explains Yonechi was injected with a freezing agent, the same substance they've been researching. But their work is years from completion. It would take at least 5 to 10 years to perfect. Yet somehow, someone's already figured it out and used the finished product as a weapon. Lisa thinks Yonechi can still be saved, so she defrosts him. After a tense rescue effort, Yonechi's heart starts beating again. But as he wakes, he screams in agony. His body temperature rapidly spikes, and suddenly he bursts into flames, burning alive before their eyes. After work, Lisa boards a bus to go home and spots the old man again. He says nothing but quietly follows her smell. When Lisa confronts him, he calmly tells her he's there to end her smelly life. But after looking at her, he changes his mind and walks away. Lisa later told Mulder and Scully everything and even helped sketch a portrait of the old man. She confessed that she was actually the one who falsified the data and that Jason took the the blame to protect her, which is why his friend threatened to expose him and why Jason got into legal trouble. Through further investigation, Mulder and Scully found out that the old man had been staying at a nearby motel, but he wasn't in his room at the time. Inside the room, Mulder discovered a photo of Jason, Lisa, and the murdered Yonechi together. That's when Mulder finally put the pieces together. Yonechi didn't even know Jason or Lisa. The photo was taken in the future. The old man knew Lisa had faked the data and that Jason's friend would die. Considering the security guard's body had Jason's fingerprints, it was clear the old man was actually Jason from the future, who had traveled back through time to the present. But it wasn't just Mulder who noticed this. Lisa, looking at the old man's portrait, realized his true identity as well. She followed him to the motel, where the old man looked unwell. He pulled out the syringe again and injected himself. Lisa asked how he'd traveled through time, and the old man explained that 10 years from now, Lisa would meet a certain doctor who would reveal the theory of subatomic particles. At temperatures below absolute zero, these particles could reverse time. Suddenly, the old man injected Lisa with something too, and she collapsed, turning into an ice statue. It was clear the old man was in pain over killing Lisa. Meanwhile, Mulder managed to get Jason released on bail. Jason believed the old man had come back to stop their research project. If that was true, then the next target had to be Jason himself. Jason couldn't understand why his future self would want to stop his present self from researching. Jason took Mulder to his lab, but was told someone had already used his fingerprints to get inside, suggesting the future Jason was already in there. Mulder urged Jason to call Scully right away. Meanwhile, Scully was trying to save Lisa, who, after being defrosted, showed the same symptoms as Yonechi. Her body temperature shot up dangerously. To prevent another tragedy, Scully ordered staff to submerge Lisa in water to cool her down. After intensive care, Lisa's temperature finally stabilized. Back at the lab, Mulder learned from an assistant that someone was deleting all data related to the research from the main server. Mulder rushed to the server room, unaware Jason was already there. The old man told Jason that Lisa's future discoveries would create a terrifying world without history or hope, because everyone would know the future. Lisa's research depended on Jason's cryogenic freezing agent. If Jason's work was destroyed, Lisa's project would vanish too. Jason didn't want the old man to destroy his life's work and accused him of killing Lisa. Just then, Mulder informed Jason that Lisa had been saved. Hearing this, the old man fell into despair. He embraced Jason, intending to die with him. Suddenly, the old man's body ignited spontaneously. Inside the room, Jason screamed in agony while Mulder could do nothing from outside. Later, Mulder told Scully only one body was found at the scene. He believed the universe could only have one outcome. No matter how much the old man tried, the future couldn't be changed. In the final scene, Lisa stood in the lab staring at the molecular structure of a compound on her screen. That wraps up this episode. The old man's goal was to stop his past self from developing the freezing agent because that research would help Lisa create a hopeless, doomed world. Knowing he couldn't save his friend's life, he deliberately manipulated his past self into taking the blame and going to jail to halt the research. Since there were 3 people involved in the project, he also killed Yonechi, but because of his deep feelings for Lisa, he hesitated to kill her. When he finally resolved to do it, Scully's intervention ruined his plan by bringing Lisa back to life. Previously, we learned that time travel in this world requires absolute zero temperatures. That's why the old man kept giving himself regular injections of a cryogenic serum, but its terrible side effect is spontaneous combustion. He figured if he stopped the injections and died with his younger self, Lisa's research would be doomed too. If his younger self in the past never survived, his future self couldn't exist. That's why only one body was ever found at the server room blast site. In fact, Lisa was the quietly ruthless schemer. She faked her data to secure funding and leaned on Jason to take the fall. When she heard Dr. Yonechi had been frozen into an ice statue, she volunteered to save him, but really she wanted his cryogenics expertise for herself. And once she was healed, she quietly resumed the project in secret, proving that even in the future the old man most feared, her world-ending technology would still come to pass. Mulder's belief that the universe allows only one outcome held true. The scene shifts to a woman named Amanda who is in labor. Medical staff wheel her into the delivery room, and the nurse asks for the baby's father's contact info. Amanda replies he's not from this planet. The nurse is baffled. Amanda's delivery goes smoothly. The baby is healthy, except for a plump little tail dangling from his spine. Mulder, intrigued by the supernatural, drives Scully to the hospital. Amanda looks exhausted but relieved. The doctor reassures her the tail can be removed in a few months without harm. When asked about the father, Amanda lights up, saying he's Luke Skywalker, a die-hard fan who's watched Star Wars many times. Mulder and Scully chalk it up to deep delusion, But just as they're about to leave, they learn this small town has seen 5 babies born with tails in the past 3 months. DNA tests confirm they all share the same father. Scully points out this must be inherited, meaning the father himself likely had a tail removed by surgery later on. Researching further, Mulder discovers all 5 were conceived via a private fertility clinic. When they arrive, the place is swarming with angry couples. The mothers know their husband's sperm was used, but it wasn't their real partners fathering these children. Anyone would be furious. In the clinic lab, a custodian scrubs away. Mulder spots a scar at the base of the man's spine, clearly from a tail removal surgery, and casually asks him a few questions. The custodian panics and bolts. The man, named Eddie, claims all 5 women were irresistibly drawn to him and volunteered to bear his children. Mulder and Scully exchange skeptical looks. None of those wives even knew him. They suspect Eddie must have slipped the husband some kind of drug. Later, a police officer processes Eddie's information at the station. In the officer's brief absence, Eddie shapeshifts into the cop's exact likeness. He knocks the real officer out and grumbles about his name being misspelled on the paperwork. So, Eddie not only has a tail, but also has perfect disguise skills. Mulder reasons that Eddie likely posed as each husband. That explains how he fathered all 5 babies. Determined to find him, Mulder and Scully trace Eddie to his home, greeted by an elderly man who claims to be Eddie's father. A circus poster on the wall shows the old man once performed under the big top and sported a tail of his own. He says Eddie, ashamed, had it surgically removed in youth. But when the father calls Mulder by name, something Mulder never said, everything clicks. This is not the father, but still Eddie himself. Exposed, Eddie flees, taking on Mulder's visage and slipping into a couple's home. The real Mulder found Eddie's long-deceased father's body at Eddie's house. Using lime, he had sealed the elder's corpse up in the attic. Scully then took the body to the lab. Just as they were preparing for the autopsy, Mulder walked in. Scully explained that Eddie's father had a unique layer of muscle under his skin, muscles that could contract and relax to alter his shape. While she was explaining, Mulder accidentally yanked the tail off the old man's corpse. Panicking at the thought Scully might blame him, Mulder quickly came up with an excuse and left the lab. Later, Mulder visited Amanda's hospital room. It turned out Amanda and Eddie had been high school classmates. Amanda described Eddie as a hopeless loser. She mocked his job, family, and timid personality. After their talk, Mulder gave Amanda a flower and then left the room looking downcast. No sooner had he stepped out than another Mulder walked in. This one was Eddie in disguise. Realizing the real Mulder was back, Eddie fled. The real Mulder pieced together from Amanda's words that Eddie was impersonating him. He chased after the imposter all the way to the locker room, only to be blindsided and knocked out by Eddie hiding in the ceiling. Eddie then transformed into Mulder's exact image and said the case was boring. He urged Scully to give up the investigation and return with him, leaving the real Mulder locked in the basement. Because the fake Mulder couldn't do the job properly, the FBI case reports were riddled with errors. When questioned about the death of Eddie's father, Scully said it was natural causes. The imposter claimed Eddie had hidden the body to continue collecting the old man's pension. After some discussion, they decided that Eddie's shape-shifting and deceiving several wives into relations constituted a crime, so they put out a warrant for his arrest. After work, the fake Mulder went to the real Mulder's apartment. He admired himself in the mirror over and over, awkwardly mimicking Mulder's heroic work mannerisms, clearly enjoying the new identity. Later, he brought a bottle of wine to Scully's place. On the surface, it was to discuss the case, but really he had ill intentions toward the beautiful agent. He plied her with drinks until her guard was down and she was intoxicated. Just as he was about to make his move, the real Mulder, who had finally escaped, burst in. Scully, shocked, quickly moved aside. Exposed, the fake Mulder sighed and transformed back into Eddie's original form. The episode ends with Mulder visiting Eddie in prison, where Eddie was wearing a superhero hat. He said he'd been beaten constantly and that his therapist brought him the hat weekly to boost his confidence. Because the doctors kept giving him muscle relaxants, he could no longer change his appearance at will. Eddie still obsessively thought about the beautiful Scully and mocked Mulder, calling him a loser in spirit while labeling himself a loser in life. The scene shifts to a post office where 2 employees are on break. The woman in fat and sugar complains of nicotine withdrawal and slips into the restroom for a smoke. Moments later, dozens of bees follow the sugar scent and emerge from the sink, swarming the stalls just as she lights up. Unaware, she inhales deeply. Then her greasy body is stung to a greasy death. The other employee had waited a long time without seeing the greasy woman, so she went to the restroom, only to find her dead like a piece of soap inside a stall. Strangely, the bees from earlier had all vanished. Late at night, someone sneaked into Mulder's office and deleted the case file related to the greasy woman. It turned out that the intruder was his superior, Skinner. Afterward, Skinner returned home and changed clothes. He first went to the restroom where the incident had occurred, threw the greasy woman's cigarette butt into the toilet, and then thoroughly cleaned the restroom inside and out. At that moment, he noticed a honey-like substance seeping from the ceiling. Without giving it much thought, he casually wiped it away and left the scene. Next, he went to the morgue and stole the woman's greasy corpse. Surprisingly strong, he threw her heavy body into the cremator. After all of this, he impersonated Mulder and went to the local police station to swap out the woman's blood sample. Skinner thinks he's erased every trace, but there's always one loose end. As he's leaving the station, a local detective who'd emailed the case file to Mulder's computer mistakes Skinner for Mulder and pleads for help. Skinner brushes him off and drives away. Back at home, Skinner tosses his crime-stained clothes in the trash, only to bump into the real Mulder. Mulder arrived after receiving that detective's email tip, but the file is gone from his computer. Worse, he learns the detective was gunned down just 2 hours earlier. Sensing something dire, Skinner races to meet the smoking man. Turns out Scully has been hospitalized. Skinner had followed the smoking man's orders to protect her, but the smoking man, annoyed by his incompetence, ordered the detective killed to keep Skinner's secret safe. Furious, Skinner swears he's done doing the smoking man's dirty work, only to return home and discover his service weapon has been stolen. The smoking man's underling used it to execute the detective. Trapped, Skinner reluctantly calls the smoking man, who coldly warns him not to play with fire. Determined to fight back, Skinner returns to the crime restroom and smashes through the hive-like wall panel, revealing a giant beehive. He brings it to an entomologist who harvests some larvae, warning they must mature before identifying the killer bee species. But these bees grow at an insane rate and soon escape, fatally stinging the entomologist. At the FBI, Skinner digs up a file on a previous killer bee case Mulder investigated. The file lists the UN assistant as a contact. He calls the contact to get intel on these bees. Meanwhile, the entomologist's body is brought to the police, only it turns out he didn't die from bee venom but from smallpox. Impossible, since smallpox was declared eradicated decades ago. Yet stingers recovered from his body suggest someone is weaponizing bees to spread smallpox. Skinner tracks down the greasy woman's co-worker, learning that broken packages had been left in a storage room next to the restroom the day before the attack, and that shadowy figures removed them right after the incident. With bees breeding at a furious pace, they've now started attacking the public. The UN assistant arrives with a chilling revelation. All the killer bees originated from one of those postal packages. Elsewhere, Mulder is investigating the mysterious death of the local detective. He gets his hands on a blurry surveillance video that shows the detective meeting with a man shortly before his murder. After some digital enhancement by the tech team, Mulder recognizes the man. It's none other than Skinner. That night, Skinner returns home and finds his missing service weapon has been quietly returned. Before he can breathe a sigh of relief, he realizes Mulder is there, pointing a gun straight at him. Skinner tries to explain everything, insisting he only did what he did to save a gravely ill Scully. But Mulder isn't buying it. He sends the gun to forensics for a ballistics match, and it comes back as the weapon used to kill the detective. Surprisingly, Mulder doesn't turn him in. He believes Skinner is being manipulated by the smoking man. Determined to find answers, Skinner sneaks into the smoking man's home. The smoking man calmly warns him he's playing with fire, but Skinner doesn't kill him. He still believes the smoking man might be able to help save Scully. The story ends with a call between the smoking man and the UN assistant. She coolly tells him everything is under control. Clearly, the UN isn't so innocent either. The scene shifts to a late-night bowling alley where it's almost closing time, and the owner is wrapping up for the night. Harold, a slow-moving employee, is still tidying the shoe rack. The owner, annoyed at his pace, offers to help, but Harold snaps, accusing the owner of messing everything up. After a few calming words, the owner tells Harold to call it a night. Once Harold leaves, something strange happens. Lane 6 activates on its own. A ball rolls down the lane, streaked with what looks like blood. Curious and unnerved, the owner ventures into the ball return system and finds a woman's body jammed inside. Just then, police sirens blare outside. The owner rushes out for help, only to see that the victim, the same woman from the lane, is already lying dead just outside the alley. So who or what did he see inside? The next day, Mulder and Scully visit the bowling alley. They examine Lane 6 and find some strange markings. Mulder pours a cup of soda on the lane, and a message appears beneath the sticky liquid: "She is me." Mulder suspects this is the victim's spirit reaching out. The local police then reveal something chilling. In the past 3 months, 3 women have been murdered within a 6-block radius. Each had their throats slashed. Same MO, same precision. Even more bizarre, the 911 call reporting the most recent murder came from a nearby psychiatric hospital. The place is filled with unstable patients, tended by just one grizzled old doctor and a frumpy nurse. Turns out Harold, the bowling alley employee, lives there as a patient. When Mulder asks who made the emergency call, the patients speak incoherently, except for Harold, who sits silently in the corner, clearly agitated. This catches Mulder's attention. He and the nurse later question Harold directly, but he denies making any call. When asked if he's seen the ghost of the victim, Harold becomes deeply distressed, forcing the nurse to step in and calm him. Mulder is convinced Harold is connected to the case. Scully examines the victim's photos and notices something odd. Their rings were removed after death, then placed back on different fingers. She concludes the killer likely suffers from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, and Harold fits the profile, having both autism and the disorder. Scully is convinced Harold is the killer. Mulder disagrees, arguing that reporting the crime doesn't necessarily make him the culprit. Their argument escalates until Scully suddenly gets a nosebleed, suggesting that her cancer is getting worse. Scully went back to the bowling alley restroom alone to clean up and saw fresh blood spelling out "She is me" on the mirror. Then, just for a few seconds, she glimpsed a young woman in a hoodie standing behind her before the vision vanished. At that moment, Mulder burst in and told her a 4th woman had been murdered that very night. The victim, too, was wearing a hoodie. Shaken, Scully said nothing about what she'd seen. The next morning, she went to the hospital for tests, not because she doubted her own eyes, but because she couldn't bear to admit she'd seen a ghost. To her, that meant her own time was running out. Meanwhile, Mulder tracked Harold to the back rooms of the bowling alley where the autistic man was curled up, muttering "She is me" over and over. Mulder gently explained that he didn't believe Harold was a killer and asked him to help with the investigation. Together with the alley owner, who comforted Harold, they followed him to a disused storeroom. Inside, Harold had plastered the walls with clients' names and their scores, every game, every player, down to the 4 women who'd since been murdered. Harold stared at the owner's apparition, his beloved boss, who had just collapsed from a heart attack and died. Overcome with grief, Harold bolted. That night, he was returned to the psychiatric hospital. The kindly doctor urged him to take his medication and rest, but Harold refused, growing ever more anxious. When the nurse came in, she promised to look after him, but once the doctor left, her tone changed entirely. She forced pills into Harold's hand, mocking him for being ugly and foolish, deriding his secret crush on the dead women. At the same time, Mulder brought Scully to the hospital, planning for Scully to examine Harold. Suddenly, a scream rang out. Harold had attacked the nurse and escaped the ward. Scully tracked down his roommate, who revealed that Harold had confided the nurse had been secretly swapping his meds for poison. Worse, Harold had been harboring an unrequited love for these women, storing their photographs because they'd all been kind to him. Scully confronted the nurse, who was hiding in the restroom, taking pills and feigning innocence. Scully learned the nurse's husband had left her for another woman. Spotting the pills, Scully pressed her, and the nurse finally threw off her mask and lunged at Scully with a razor. The nurse forgot Scully was an FBI agent. Scully drew her sidearm and shot her. Crime and weapons secured, the case seemed closed. In fact, the nurse had long suffered from untreated mental illness and was indeed secretly overdosing on Harold's meds, drugs whose side effect is violent outbursts. Mulder returned to find Harold dead in the alley. He'd collapsed and died suddenly of unknown causes. In the final scene, Scully confided to Mulder that she, too, had seen the 4th victim's ghost in the restroom, though she'd refused to admit it. Alone in her car, tears flowing, she looked up to see Harold's spirit smiling at her, his final reminder that her own time might be nearly up. The haunting refrain, "She is me," remains a chilling mystery. Maybe it refers to a departed soul. Only those nearing death can see a departed soul. The spirits whispered, "She is me," so the dying wouldn't doubt their eyes, that the apparition they saw was real, not a hallucination. There's another possibility behind the phrase. The "she" might not refer to a ghost at all, but to the mentally unstable nurse. The nurse had once confided in Scully that her husband left her for another woman, a betrayal that twisted her mind and made her resent others' happiness. When she discovered that Harold harbored romantic feelings for the victims, women who had shown him kindness, she became jealous of the joy he felt. Driven by cruelty, she began secretly swapping Harold's daily meds for slow-acting poison. Harold knew what was happening. He stopped taking the pills, but he was too scared to tell anyone, except for his roommate, who was also a psychiatric patient. Scully later mentioned that the nurse had been taking Harold's medication herself, which suggests she might have suffered from the same mental illness or perhaps something even more severe. From this angle, "she is me" could mean something like "she's just like me." If that interpretation holds, it undermines the ghost theory altogether. Maybe those weren't ghosts that Harold saw, but mental projections, born of his powerful psyche. Since he loved those women, the projections naturally took on their appearance. Unable to express himself clearly, Harold may have been trying to communicate in his own way that the real killer was someone who shared his condition, another person suffering from deep psychological illness. The scene shifts to a haunting dream where Mulder is a child again. His little sister Samantha appears as she once was, frightened, while their parents shout at each other downstairs. Mulder sees his childhood reflection in the mirror. Samantha tells him she's scared. Then Mulder wakes in a cold sweat covered in blood. Panicked, he immediately calls Scully. She drives overnight to a seedy motel where she finds Mulder shivering in the bathroom trying to warm up under the shower. He tells her he can't stop feeling cold. Scully checks his gun. It's missing 2 bullets. His clothes are stained with blood. Things are looking grim. Mulder has no memory of the past 2 days. They discover a set of keys that doesn't belong to him, labeled with the name Am. When they go to leave, they realize the car outside isn't even Mulder's, and the steering wheel is also smeared with blood. Scully rifles through the car's documents and finds it's registered to Amy's husband, so now it's clear. Mulder somehow ended up with Amy's keys and her husband's car. However, Mulder insists he's never met either of them. They track down Amy's home address and learn from the housekeeper that Amy and her husband disappeared the night before. Mulder notices a painting in the house, of a specific house. It was painted by Amy herself. There are several similar paintings, all focused on that same property. Mulder is struck by déjà vu. He's convinced he's seen that house before. He even knows the address. They drive there. It's old, long abandoned. The moment they arrive, Mulder is hit by another flashback. This time, not just his arguing parents, but the smoking man in his younger days. Shaken but determined, Mulder explores the house. In one of the rooms, they find the dead bodies of Amy and her husband, both killed by a single gunshot. Given that Mulder's gun was short 2 bullets and now 2 corpses are found, they immediately call the police. Scully believes Mulder is innocent, but Mulder insists he's guilty. His fingerprints are all over the scene. The blood on his clothes matches the victim's. He remembers nothing but refuses to defend himself. Scully tries to shut his smelly mouth up multiple times, but he won't stop confessing. It's no surprise when he's taken into custody. Scully performs autopsies and makes a few discoveries. Amy was 62 and had a small wound on her forehead. Lab results reveal that she had large doses of hallucinogenic anesthetics in her system. The same substance was found in Mulder's blood. It's entirely possible he was drugged, and that's why he can't remember anything. Scully clings to this hope, but Mulder seems to have given up on himself. Cut to another man. He's in his home, cutting up old photos. He slices his own face out of group pictures. Suddenly, blood trickles down his forehead. Once done, he walks into a prison. He's a prison guard. He sits down, stares at one final photo, and kills himself. Scully later discovers the small wound on his forehead, too. It turns out this prison guard had a history of mental instability and a deep belief in the supernatural. Scully visits the home of the prison guard and discovers that he had known the 2 other deceased, Amy and her husband. She starts to suspect that Mulder didn't kill them at all. Instead, she believes that, just like the prison guard, they both committed suicide. Meanwhile, Mulder continues to be plagued by nightmares in jail. This time, he finally uncovers the reason behind his parents' constant fighting when he was a child. The smoking man had made an agreement with Mulder's father to take Samantha away. When Mulder wakes up, he immediately requests to speak with Scully. Fortunately, by then, Scully has gathered enough evidence to prove that Amy had taken her own life and that she killed her husband before doing so. With this new information, Mulder is released on bail. Scully begins to piece everything together. Both Amy and the prison guard had claimed before their deaths that they'd been abducted by aliens. It's likely that, while Mulder was investigating their stories, Amy murdered her husband. Scully tracks down Amy's psychiatrist and discovers that not only Amy but the prison guard had both received treatment from him. This psychiatrist used a highly unconventional method, drilling a small hole in the patient's skull and administering electroshock therapy to supposedly recover suppressed memories of alien abductions. Shockingly, Mulder had also visited this psychiatrist, but has no memory of it. In a daze, Mulder starts seeing disturbing images of his young mother entangled in a secret relationship with the smoking man. Distraught, he rushes to confront his mother, demanding to know if she is cheating on his dad and what relationship she is with the smoking man. Furious and defensive, his mother refuses to answer. In the heat of the argument, blood starts trickling from Mulder's forehead. Determined to uncover the truth behind Samantha's abduction, Mulder secretly returns to the psychiatrist and demands to undergo the memory recovery procedure. The doctor injects him with a powerful drug and begins the electroshock treatment. Images flash in Mulder's mind, his mother, father, and the smoking man locked in endless arguments. To intensify the process, the doctor drills into Mulder's skull. By the time Scully arrives, Mulder is gone. All that's left is a pool of blood on the floor. Mulder flees to his childhood home. There, the memory hits him. Samantha being taken by aliens, crying out to him for help. The memory is so vivid, so painful, that Mulder considers ending his life. At his breaking point, he even points a gun at Scully when she tries to stop him. Scully believes Mulder is suffering from a severe mental breakdown, his visions the result of the hallucinogenic drugs. Overwhelmed, Mulder fires several rounds into the air, letting out his rage and despair. Then he collapses into Scully's arms. In the end, after medical treatment, Mulder shows signs of improvement, but the truth about Amy and her husband's deaths still eludes him. He remembers nothing. This episode sheds more light on Samantha's mysterious disappearance, revealing potential ties to the smoking man and the secret organization. It seems Mulder's father may have reluctantly cooperated with them, likely under pressure. No parent would willingly hand over their child. The bleeding from Mulder's forehead, mirroring what happened to Amy and the prison guard, suggests that he too underwent the same invasive treatment. But because of the hallucinogens used in the process, the memories it brought back may not be real at all. It's possible that what Mulder saw was merely a fabricated illusion, planted by the same organization. Scully continues to believe Mulder's dreamlike memories are signs of a mental illness. In her view, Samantha's disappearance might not have involved aliens at all, but was rather the result of Mulder's tortured imagination. To make things worse, there's a known side effect of this treatment. Patients often end up committing suicide. The scene shifts to several months earlier in the Canadian Rockies, an unforgiving wasteland of ice and snow. A scientific team has set up camp after discovering a body frozen within the glacier. It's the corpse of an extraterrestrial. Elsewhere, Scully's family is hosting a once-in-a-decade reunion dinner at their home. Her mother has invited cousins and lifelong friends. Even Scully's brother has flown in for the celebration. Just as the laughter peaks, Mulder calls. He's received the same tip about Canada's alien find. From his informant, Mulder has obtained a photograph of the perfectly preserved corpse said to come from his informant's colleague Babcock. Worried it might be a hoax, Mulder asks Scully to authenticate an ice core sample taken from around the body. Though her cancer has now spread and she doesn't want to leave home, Scully reluctantly agrees. Mulder flies straight to Canada. Back in the Rockies, Babcock is loading shells into his shotgun for protection. The team has just sliced open the ice layer and found a perfect circular port, like a high-tech injection site, on the alien sarcophagus. That very night, in a sudden fit of madness, Babcock turns his gun on his teammates and murders every single one. The next day, Mulder arrives, guided by his informant, to the same mountain pass. With no local support, they trek in fading daylight to the research camp, only to find the team slaughtered and the ice block vanished. Babcock, wounded by a self-inflicted shot, emerges from the tent, claiming to be the sole survivor and insisting he stashed the alien beneath the snow. Relieved, Mulder and his informant follow him to the hiding place. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Scully runs the ice core through the lab. The results astonish her. The sample dates back millions of years and contains chimeric plant animal cells, life forms the likes of which Earth has never known. That night, she returns to the lab to pore over the data, and a suited man breaks in, steals the core, and wounds her in the scuffle. News of Scully's attack reaches her brother, who begs her to think of herself first and to stop chasing Mulder's cases. Scully hesitates. These investigations have taken a brutal toll on her life and health. Back in Canada, Mulder, his informant, and the injured Babcock transport the alien's ice tomb back to the U.S. for thawing. Mulder voices fresh doubts. If this alien is a fake, why would anyone risk their lives to snatch it from a glacier? A few tense hours later, the ice melts away, and there in the lab lies the little being himself. At just 147 centimeters tall, with 4 fingers on each hand and 3 toes per foot, the creature's anatomy is undeniably non-human. Mulder's eyes light up, thinking that they have found proof. The scene shifts. Scully tracks down the man in the suit through fingerprints he left behind. Turns out, he's a government employee working for a classified research agency. Never one to back down, Scully confronts him in an underground parking garage. Cornered, the man admits he was just following orders under duress. After their tense exchange, Scully finally pieces together the real story and immediately calls Mulder. But just as Mulder leaves the lab, someone else returns to the alien autopsy site. It's clear this person is working with Babcock. He kills the informant and asks Babcock if Mulder now fully believes the alien corpse is real. Once Babcock confirms, he too is silenced. Mulder arrives at Scully's home, where the man in the suit reveals his true identity. He works for the Department of Defense. He tells Mulder that everything he's been chasing, UFOs, alien abductions, was fabricated by the government to distract the public and conceal crimes committed by a military contractor. The government needed a true believer like Mulder to sell the alien narrative. Even the story of Mulder's sister being abducted was a lie orchestrated by the military to manipulate his father. The countless UFO sightings over the years were all top-secret military aircraft. As for the alien corpse, it was a chimera, grown from biological materials and injected into the ice to simulate an extraterrestrial. Mulder refuses to believe it. He rushes back to the lab, only to find the alien corpse gone. All that remains are the bodies of the informant and Babcock. Scully tries to bring Mulder back to reality, saying none of it was real. He was just a pawn in their game. In the heat of the argument, Scully blurts out the most painful truth. They even gave her cancer just to make him believe. Mulder is left speechless. That night, he stares blankly at a televised conference about unidentified life forms. Overwhelmed with guilt, he thinks of everything he's sacrificed for the truth, how his obsession cost Scully's sister her life, and now Scully herself her health. Silent tears stream down his face. The episode ends with Scully briefing FBI higher-ups on the case. After walking them through the entire sequence of events, one of the directors asks where Agent Mulder is now. Scully lowers her gaze and quietly replies that Mulder took his own life last night. This final episode reveals that there may never have been any intelligent extraterrestrial life to begin with. The government fabricated the entire alien narrative, UFO sightings, abduction stories, alien bodies, all as an elaborate smokescreen to distract from its own classified activities. They targeted believers like Mulder, feeding them just enough evidence to keep them chasing ghosts, leaking staged intel at regular intervals to maintain the illusion. They went so far as to inject plant-animal hybrid cells into ice cores to create fake alien bodies, then used Babcock to leak this to Mulder's informant, who in turn passed it to Mulder, along with 2 sample cores. Once Mulder was successfully lured to Canada, and fearing Scully might expose the fraud, they dispatched the man in the suit to steal the samples. Then, they had Babcock murder the entire research team, not just to silence them, but to create the illusion that other groups were trying to steal the alien remains, thus cementing Mulder's belief. It wasn't about using Mulder to spread the alien story, it was about breaking him. Maybe the real goal all along was to push him to the edge and make sure he never came back. With that, Season 4 of this drama concludes.